Part 1 had worked for the Galactic Festival Registry for 347 standard years. In that time, she had seen things that would make most beings question the nature of joy itself. She had watched the crystalline harmonics of where beings made of living glass sang frequencies that could shatter mountains. She had documented the quantum morning dances of where an entire species existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously just to honor their dead. She had even survived the bioluminescent mating festival of the Chordata 7 Collective, though she preferred not to discuss the details of that particular assignment. Nothing surprised her anymore. At least, that was what she believed until the day her supervisor called her into his office and handed her a new case file. "Humans," her supervisor said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "New species. Just made contact with the Federation about 60 of their years ago. We need someone to classify their major celebrations for the registry." Took the file and flipped through it with her primary manipulators. The species looked unremarkable. Soft bodies, bilateral symmetry, carbon-based biology. They came from a small planet orbiting an average yellow star in an unremarkable arm of an unremarkable galaxy. They were tragically short, barely a century for most of them. "Why me?" she asked. "This seems like a junior assignment." Her supervisor made a sound that her translator interpreted as a sigh. "The last 3 researchers we sent came back with incomplete reports. They all requested reassignment before finishing their observations." "Were the humans hostile?" "No, they were confused." Her supervisor leaned forward. "The humans apparently have thousands of celebrations, literally thousands. They cannot agree on which ones are important when they should happen or even what they mean. The researchers could not make sense of any of it." Felt a small spark of interest ignite in her chest. A challenge. After 3 centuries, she welcomed one. "I will begin with their largest celebration," she said. "What do they call it?" Her supervisor checked his notes. "New Year's Eve. It marks the end of one orbital cycle and the beginning of another." Almost laughed. A simple calendrical celebration. Every species had one. This would take her perhaps a week to document and classify. She would be home before the next cycle of her own planet's moons. She was very, very wrong. Arrived on Earth 3 days before the human celebration was scheduled to begin. She chose a location that her preliminary research indicated would have one of the largest gatherings. The humans called it New York City, and within that city, they had designated something called Times Square as the center of their festivities. She parked her observation vessel in a stationary orbit and descended to the surface in a personal transport pod disguised as a human vehicle. The Federation had provided her with a holographic disguise that made her appear human, though she found the form uncomfortable. Humans only had 4 limbs. How did they accomplish anything? The first thing she noticed about New York City was the noise. Humans were everywhere, moving in chaotic patterns that seemed to follow no logical system. They shouted at each other, laughed, argued, and made sounds with their vocal cords that served no apparent communicative purpose. Her translator worked overtime trying to process the cacophony. The second thing she noticed was the cold. The humans had apparently scheduled their major celebration during their planet's axial tilt away from their sun, at least in this hemisphere. The air bit at her holographic skin, and she watched with amazement as humans walked through the streets with exposed faces, seemingly unbothered by temperatures that would have sent most species running for thermal shelters. She found a position near the center of Times Square and activated her recording equipment. Around her, humans had already begun to gather, even though the main event was still 3 days away. They carried bags and blankets and containers of food. Some of them wore strange hats covered in reflective material. Many of them held signs with numbers on them. Approached one of the humans, a female with dark hair and bright eyes. "Excuse me," she said, her translator converting her words into the local language. "What is the purpose of the signs?" The human looked at her with an expression that training identified as friendly amusement. First time in the city for New Year's. Yes, I'm a researcher. The human laughed. Well, the signs show the new year. When the ball drops at midnight, it'll be the new year, and everyone wants to show they were here for it. Recorded this information. What is the significance of the ball? It's just tradition. They've been dropping it for over 100 years. When it reaches the bottom, the new year starts. But the new year would begin regardless of whether the ball drops or not, pointed out. The planet's orbital position determines the passage of time, not the vertical movement of a sphere. The human stared at her for a moment, then laughed again. You must be fun at parties. Did not understand what parties had to do with astronomical accuracy, but she thanked the human and continued her observations. Over the next 3 days, she watched the crowd grow. Humans arrived from all over the planet. Her scans detected individuals from hundreds of different geographic regions, speaking dozens of different languages. They came alone, in pairs, in large groups. Some of them had traveled for days just to stand in this one location at this one moment in time. She documented everything. The food vendors selling items that her scanner identified as questionable but apparently delicious. The performers who entertained the crowd with music and dance. The security personnel who attempted to maintain order among the growing masses. The vendors selling hats and noisemakers and glasses shaped like the numbers of the coming year. By the evening of the celebration, over 1 million humans had packed themselves into a space that her calculations suggested could comfortably hold perhaps a quarter of that number. They stood shoulder to shoulder, pressed together against the cold, and they were all smiling. Did not understand. These humans had traveled great distances at considerable expense. They had waited in freezing temperatures for hours, even days. They were uncomfortable, crowded, and many of them had not slept properly in quite some time. By any reasonable metric, they should have been miserable. Instead, they were radiating joy. Her emotional sensors had never recorded readings like this. The collective happiness in Times Square was approaching levels she had only seen during the crystalline harmonics, and that was a celebration that had taken 10,000 years to develop. At 11:59, the crowd began to count. 1 million voices spoke in unison, marking each second as the glowing sphere descended its tower. 10, 9, 8. Felt her own hearts begin to beat faster. The energy in the crowd was infectious. Her holographic disguise flickered slightly as her concentration wavered. 7, 6, 5. The humans around her were holding hands with strangers. Tears streamed down faces. Laughter mixed with screaming. 4, 3, 2. Found herself counting along. 1. The sphere reached the bottom. The crowd erupted. The sound was deafening. Fireworks exploded overhead, filling the sky with colors that her species could not naturally perceive. Humans embraced each other, kissing and crying and screaming with joy. Confetti rained down from above, covering everything in small pieces of reflective paper. Music played from speakers so loud that felt it vibrating in her thorax. And then, impossibly, they began to sing. Her translator struggled with the words, something about old acquaintances and not forgetting them. The melody was simple, almost primitive by galactic standards, but 1 million humans sang it together, arms linked, swaying in the cold night air. Stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by joy she could not explain. And for the first time in 300 years of research, she had absolutely no idea how to classify what she was witnessing. She activated her communication device and sent a message to her supervisor. Initial observation complete, she reported. Requesting extended assignment. Current classification, unknown. Possible mass hysteria event. Possible species-wide coordinated joy phenomenon. Possibly something entirely new. She paused, watching a human father lift his small child onto his shoulders so the young one could see the fireworks. Further study required, she concluded. Much further study. She ended the transmission and returned to her observations. Around her, the humans continued to celebrate. They would keep celebrating, she would later learn, for hours. Some of them would celebrate until the sun rose. They were welcoming a new year. They were welcoming hope. And who had seen wonders across the galaxy, found herself completely unprepared for the simple, stubborn joy of humanity. Part 2. The Galactic Festival Registry took requests seriously. Within a standard month, they had assembled a full research team and dispatched them to Earth with instructions to document every aspect of human New Year celebrations. The team included specialists in sociology, psychology, anthropology, and temporal studies. They were the best researchers the registry had to offer. They were also completely overwhelmed within the first week. The problem, as the team leader explained in her first report to the registry committee, was that humans did not have one New Year celebration. They had dozens, perhaps hundreds. The number kept growing every time they thought they had documented them all. Letta that focused on the celebration she had originally witnessed, the one humans called New Year's Eve. They embedded observers in major cities across the planet: Sydney, Tokyo, London, Paris, Moscow, Cairo. Each location celebrated the same event, but each did it differently. In Sydney, humans gathered around a massive harbor and watched fireworks explode over a structure shaped like a strange aquatic creature. In Tokyo, they visited temples at midnight and rang bells 108 times. In London, they gathered around a giant clock and counted down as it chimed 12 times. In Paris, they opened bottles of fermented grape juice and sprayed each other with the foam. They wore white clothing and jumped over waves in the ocean. In Moscow, they listened to their national leader speak, and then toasted with a clear alcoholic beverage. Same celebration, same moment, completely different traditions. But that was only the beginning of the confusion. Another had been assigned to document something called Lunar New Year. This celebration did not happen at the same time as the other New Year. It followed a different calendar entirely, one based on the cycles of Earth's moon rather than its orbit around its sun. This celebration was older than the other one, stretching back thousands of human years. The Lunar New Year involved fireworks too, but also dragons. Not real dragons, which knew existed on several planets in the Outer Rim, but artificial ones. Humans would create long dragon costumes and dance in the streets while drums played and firecrackers exploded. They gave each other red envelopes containing money. They ate special foods and visited their families and cleaned their homes to sweep away bad fortune. It was beautiful, it was joyous, it was celebrated by billions of humans. And it was only one of many. The research team discovered Nowruz, a New Year celebration that happened during Earth's northern spring equinox. Humans in certain regions set elaborate tables with symbolic items and jumped over fires and grew wheat sprouts in dishes. They visited relatives in order of age and gave gifts of money to children. They discovered a new year that happened in what most humans called autumn. Humans who observed this one blew ceremonial horns and ate apples dipped in honey and asked each other for forgiveness. They threw bread into bodies of water to symbolize casting away their mistakes. They discovered Diwali, which was not technically a new year but marked a new year for some humans in some regions. This one involved millions of tiny flames lit in homes and temples and streets. Humans exchanged sweets and gifts and set off fireworks that rivaled anything had seen during her initial observation. They discovered more, so many more, each one different, each one joyful, each one celebrated by millions or billions of humans who considered it the true beginning of their year. Requested a meeting with the full research team 3 months into their assignment. They gathered in their orbital station above Earth, surrounded by data screens and holographic displays showing their accumulated observations. "How do we classify this?" she asked. "They have no unified tradition, No consistent ritual, no coherent philosophy. By every standard the registry uses, this should be impossible to document. The team's cultural specialist, a being named who had spent his career studying species-wide celebrations, spoke first. I have been analyzing the common elements across all human New Year traditions. There are surprisingly many. He activated a display showing his findings. First, community gathering. Every human New Year celebration involves bringing people together, families, friends, or strangers. Humans do not celebrate the passage of time alone if they can help it. Second, noise. Every tradition involves making sounds. Fireworks, bells, drums, singing, shouting. Humans seem compelled to announce the new year as loudly as possible. Third, symbolic renewal. Every tradition involves some form of cleansing or fresh beginning. Cleaning homes, making resolutions, casting away bad fortune, asking forgiveness. Humans treat the new year as a chance to become better versions of themselves. Fourth, and most interesting to me, hope. Every single tradition, regardless of culture or geography or historical period, involves expressing optimism about the future. They toast to better times. They wish each other happiness and prosperity. They look forward even when their past has given them no reason to do so. Studied the data, but this still does not explain why they celebrate at all. Many species mark calendrical transitions. None of them do it like this. The team's psychological specialist, a being named who could perceive emotional wavelengths, spoke next. I believe I can explain that. She activated a different display, showing emotional readings taken during various human New Year celebrations around the planet. I have been monitoring human emotional states during their celebrations. What I found disturbed me at first. Look at these readings from the moments before midnight. The display showed complex wave patterns that recognized as emotional signatures, but something was wrong with them. The patterns were chaotic, contradictory. She could see joy, yes, but also sadness, hope, but also fear, excitement, but also grief. The humans are not purely happy during their celebrations, explained. They are experiencing multiple strong emotions simultaneously. Many of them are thinking about people who died during the previous year. Many are remembering failures and disappointments. Many are afraid of what the coming year might bring. Then why do they celebrate? Asked. I was quiet for a moment. That is what I could not understand at first, but then I observed something remarkable. She changed the display to show a single human, a male of middle age, standing alone on a balcony overlooking a city. The time stamp showed it was seconds before midnight. I found this individual during my observations. He had lost his partner to illness 3 months before the celebration. His emotional readings showed profound grief, loneliness, and despair. By any reasonable prediction, he should have avoided the celebration entirely. The display showed the countdown beginning. The man's emotional signature remained heavy with sorrow. Watch what happens at midnight. The clock struck 12, fireworks exploded in the distance, and the man's emotional signature shifted. The grief did not disappear, but something else appeared alongside it. Hope, small at first, then growing. He raised a glass to the sky to no one and spoke words that A's audio sensors had captured. Here's to next year being better. The room was silent. He was not celebrating because he was happy, A said. He was celebrating because he refused to surrender to his unhappiness. He was choosing hope in defiance of his circumstances. Felt something strange in her chest, an unfamiliar sensation. If she had been human, she might have called it being moved. I found this pattern repeated millions of times across the planet, A continued. Humans who had lost loved ones, lost jobs, lost homes, lost health. Humans who had every reason to despair. And at midnight, they all made the same choice. They chose to believe that the future could be better than the past. The research team sat with this information for a long time. Finally spoke. I have studied celebrations across the galaxy for 2 centuries. Every species celebrates what they have achieved, their victories, their accomplishments, their moments of triumph. He paused, his voice uncertain in a way had never heard before. The humans celebrate what they hope to achieve. They celebrate possibility itself. They have turned the simple act of surviving another year into a declaration of faith in the future. Made her decision. We need to recommend a special classification, she said. I do not know if the committee will accept it, but I know what I have seen and I know what it means. She began composing her report to the registry. It would be the most unusual recommendation in the institution's history. But she believed it was the right one. Part 3. The proposal arrived at the Galactic Festival Registry headquarters 6 months after its team began their observations. It passed through 17 subcommittees, 4 review boards, and 3 appeals panels before finally reaching the main classification committee. By that point, it had become the most discussed proposal in registry history. The debate lasted for 3 standard weeks. The committee chamber was ancient, built during the founding of the registry over 10,000 years ago. Its walls were covered with the names of every celebration that had ever been officially classified. Billions of entries, representing the joy and sorrow and hope of countless species across the galaxy. At the center of the chamber, stood before the 12 senior committee members and defended her recommendation. Universal Joy Event, the committee chair read from the proposal. You are suggesting that human New Year celebrations be given the highest classification our registry offers. Yes, said. You understand that this classification has only been granted 3 times in our history. The remembrance of first light, which celebrates the emergence of consciousness itself. The collective pulse of the hive minds, which synchronizes the awareness of 1 trillion interconnected beings. The Stellar Bloom Festival, which marks the birth of new stars. I understand. And you believe that humans, a species that has only been part of the galactic community for 60 of their short years, deserve to have their celebration ranked alongside these monuments of sapient experience. Took a breath, I do. The committee chamber erupted in objections. Representatives from dozens of species spoke over each other, their translators struggling to keep pace with the chaos. Their celebration has no unified form, one representative argued. They cannot even agree on when their year begins. Their rituals are primitive, another added. Noise and lights and intoxicants. Every newly spacefaring species has similar traditions. They have no philosophical framework, a third complained. No deep theology, no coherent explanation for why they celebrate at all. Waited for the noise to subside. When it did, she spoke. You are all correct, she said. Human New Year celebrations have no unified form. They have no consistent ritual. They have no coherent philosophy. She paused. And that is exactly why they deserve this classification. She activated a holographic display showing Earth at the moment of one of its New Year transitions. The planet hung in the darkness of space, rotating slowly. As the Terminator line crossed each region, bursts of light appeared on the surface. Fireworks, celebrations, joy spreading across the planet in a wave that followed the progression of midnight. I have studied celebrations for 347 years, said. In that time, I have seen wonders that most beings cannot imagine. I have witnessed species achieve perfect harmony. I have watched consciousness expand across dimensions. I have been present at the birth of stars. She let the display rotate. But I have never seen anything like this. She changed the display to show individual humans during their celebrations. A family in India gathered around a table covered with sweets, laughing as children tried to stay awake until midnight. An old man in Scotland, raising a glass of whiskey in a pub filled with strangers who had become friends for one night. A young couple in Brazil, standing waist-deep in the ocean, watching fireworks reflect off the waves. Every species in this registry celebrates what they have mastered, continued. They celebrate their perfect harmonies because they have achieved perfect harmony. They celebrate their quantum transcendence because they have transcended quantum limitations. We celebrate our achievements, our certainties, our triumphs over the chaos of existence. She looked at the committee members, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Humans have achieved none of these things. Their species is young. Their lives are short. Their world is fragile. They fight among themselves constantly. They face problems they do not know how to solve. By every measure we use to evaluate species, they should be too preoccupied with survival to waste resources on celebration. She changed the display one final time. It showed the man I had observed, the one who had lost his partner, standing alone on his balcony as the fireworks lit up the sky. But they celebrate anyway, not because things are good, but because they want things to become good. Not because they have reason to hope, but because they have decided that hope itself is reason enough. They stand at the boundary between one arbitrary period of time and another, surrounded by strangers or alone in their rooms, and they choose to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. The chamber was silent. I have a colleague, said quietly, who described what humans do at New Year as weaponized optimism. I think that is exactly right. They have taken the simple act of counting backward from 10 and turned it into a declaration of war against despair. They have made joy into an act of defiance. She deactivated her display. The universal joy event classification exists for celebrations that transcend species-specific meaning. Celebrations so fundamental to the sapient experience that any conscious being can participate and find resonance. I believe Human New Year qualifies not because of what humans have achieved, but because of what they represent. She took a final breath. They represent the possibility that joy is not something you earn. It is something you choose. And if a species as young and troubled and fragile as humanity can make that choice, then so can any of us. The vote took 4 hours. Representatives argued and debated and consulted with their governments. Some remained opposed until the final moment, but when the count was finished, the result was unanimous. Human New Year celebrations were classified as the 4th universal joy event in galactic history. The registry's official entry read, Human New Year celebrations designation, universal joy event. Note: any sapient species experiencing existential uncertainty, cyclical hardship, or temporal anxiety is encouraged to observe or participate. Recommended elements include countdown rituals, explosive light displays, embrace of nearby beings, vocalization of hope, and consumption of beverages containing effervescent properties. Warning: joy may be contagious. Side effects include renewed determination, unexpected tears, and the irrational belief that next year will be better. Word spread across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of Earth requested observation rights. Delegations traveled to witness the celebration firsthand. Within a decade, Human New Year celebrations had become the most attended events in galactic history. Returned to Earth the following December 31st. This time, she did not go as a researcher. She went as a participant. She stood in Times Square again, surrounded by millions of beings. Not just humans now, but representatives of dozens of species. The cold still bit at her holographic skin. The noise still overwhelmed her audio receptors. The crowd still pressed against her from all sides. But this time she understood. At 11:59, she counted down with everyone else. Her voice joined a million others, then a billion others across the planet, then countless others across the galaxy who were watching the broadcast and counting along. 10, 9, 8. She thought about her 300 years of research, all the celebrations she had witnessed, all the joy she had documented but never quite felt herself. 7, 6, 5. She thought about the committee chamber, the debate, the moment when even the most skeptical representatives had changed their votes. 432. She thought about the human on the balcony, raising his glass to an empty sky. 1. The ball dropped, the crowd exploded, fireworks filled the sky, confetti rained down. A million voices began to sing a song about old friends and not forgetting them. And senior cultural for the Galactic Festival Registry found herself crying. A human beside her noticed her tears. He was young, barely into adulthood by human standards. He did not know who she was. He did not know that she had spent centuries studying his species. He did not know that she had argued before the most powerful committee in the galaxy on behalf of his people's celebration. He simply saw someone crying at midnight on New Year's Eve. He pulled her into a hug. "Happy New Year," he said into her ear, his voice nearly lost in the chaos around them. Hugged him back. She held on to him as if he represented everything she had learned about humanity in the past year. The hope, the defiance, the stubborn, irrational, beautiful belief that tomorrow could be better than today. "Happy New Year," she said. Above them, fireworks painted the sky in colors that her species could not naturally see, but that she could feel in her hearts. Around them, humans and aliens alike celebrated together, united in a single moment of joy. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species were learning to count backward from 10. They were learning to make noise at midnight. They were learning to embrace strangers and toast to better times. They were learning to choose hope. And in Times Square, surrounded by a million celebrating beings, finally understood why the humans did it. Not because they had reason to hope. Because hope itself was the reason. She raised her glass with everyone else, and she meant every word. To next year being better.